Oh man, which one is this? On either summer, September and October read for the second session for starting to and honestly, very, very like successful. You have so many black fun, you were so many access to our definitely have time after 121 star our of what's going on. They're not necessarily slow reads, but a lot of the action isn't yet happening. Like people are still coming out of what was the convergence. How do we think about this within our community, within our tribe or ethnic group? How do we live with this identity? How do we live in what this new world is? What are our roles now that we have gotten to this one mission? What's now like sort of like this? Is it post-apocalyptic? I don't know. It is definitely still kind of working itself through the nuts and bolts of like people kind of waking up in a society that still looks a lot like the society that they've always known, but there's very significant differences and how to navigate that space. And so it's really at this point, even chapters 8 through 16 are still a lot of just, oh, can't hear me well. My sound's right here. Let me know if this is a little better. We're still dealing with a lot of just still laying out the foundation. The syllabus or the syllabi rather, I will, if I haven't put part 2 up, I will definitely have it up tonight. But the syllabi is on sale for $4.99 because there are 2 different syllabi for this read. We broke it up into 2 parts because it is a very, very hefty syllabus that Samantha produced. She really, really draws the reader into kind of placing themselves into this landscape that Roanhorse has created. And considering how the Meridian, how the land of Tova and the mall and all these different places, how they correlate to our own lived reality in modern day society. Like kind of both, pulling and extrapolating from the book, but also putting yourself into the landscape of Fevered Star. And definitely connecting to a lot of the themes around colonization, imperialism, ethnocentrism, gender identity, and racism. And even thinking, I think a lot of those terms you think of, oh, like white people, but even thinking about like our own culpability in these systems of oppression and how we can perpetuate in our own understanding of self-preservation, that we can continually perpetuate these systems of harm. And so it's a really, really, really good syllabus produced by Samantha. And I'll probably, once I put up part 2, have an even more significant discount, because the idea is that you can basically get both of them for the price of one. But, as always, support the SPG Book Club. We do a lot of work on the syllabi. If you're an insider, you get all of them for free. If you're an insider, you also get to recommend books. I need to send that back out, send out that little form we got, and let insiders know that they can recommend readings for us. But come on over and support. We still have a little GoFundMe. Definitely donate to help us keep doing the work we're doing. It's definitely a labor of love. All right, I think we're going to start off. I know this says chapter 8, but we're actually going to start with chapter 7 because that's where we kind of left off. But it goes from 6. Does she really touch on chapter 7? Maybe we will just start at 8. Oh, she has a really good question in the syllabus. We're gonna start here. I don't know what chapter this is for, but Samantha definitely wanted to give some heat to BLM. And I think she managed to do so. What is the title of this? Okay, here we go. Share on my screen here. Pull it up. Look at little me. It's so little petite here. Okay, so this is in between chapter 6 and chapter 8. She's asking the reader to consider the following question. Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation unveiled its 2020-2021 tax filings in May 2022, which showed the organization received $76,827,002 in contributions and spent $37,710,135 in expenses. Am I even saying that correctly, girl? And generated $41,934,688 in net assets. The tax filings accounted, she got real specific here. The tax filings accounted for the spending of the organization at, roughly $6 million on property, $3 million on land, and another $3 million on buildings. Provided 25 or really 26 million in grants with a list of specific organizations and grant amounts provided to each. And then she lists out which went to domestic, to foreign governments and foreign organizations and governments. In compensation of $139,625 to Kaylee Scales, the former managing director, $0 to Patrice Cullis, founder and executive director at the time, and $804,993 to Paul Colors for professional security services. Know how the money was used. In your opinion, does this suggest that Black Lives Matter engaged in performative activism? And in what ways does performative activism contribute to the co-opting of movements? It's like, damn, Samantha, did you have a dagger you wanted to throw at these people? Much, much deserved, but like back up before here. Yeah. I think this question is really kind of rooted in the reading of Narampa's experience, and that Narampa comes from a poor, exiled class of people, the Coyote Mall, and she somehow, luck and perseverance rises to become the Sun Priest, a traditionally male head role. She is a woman. And in attuning herself to the interest of the Sky Watchers and the Sun Priest, she sort of deviated from the understanding of growing up in the mall. And now that she's returned post the convergence, she has to decide, and now she's returned with like powers that will later be illuminated in the book. But she has to decide, like, whose mission do you want to carry out? Whose politic are you adhering yourself to? Becoming the Sun Priest definitely led her to a life of comforts and power. And going back to the mall, I think she's really, even there, it's not like these forlorn people are pure, right? There's a lot of nuance in the book that definitely asks the reader to kind of think through their own positions on what side do you really stand on. I don't think there is like one truly good character in the book, and that's why I really, I'm of the school of Toni Morrison. I greatly love the complicated characters who you are moved to have at least empathy for. Is it empathy or sympathy? Yeah, empathy. You are moved to have an understanding of them, even if that's not necessarily the way you move. That like a lot of, you can't live in a world full of like trauma and oppression and come out of that bitch pure. I think that's really, that is really kind of what Roanhorse is also tapping into. But to answer the question here about BLM, I don't know if the money, I think there's plenty of other things that suggest they've engaged in performative activism. I would actually think that their response to the critiques really highlighted the performative activism they were invested in, because at bare minimum, if you're abolitionist, if you hold a truly black radical liberatory politic accountability framework, you have the means. You have the means to implement a framework of accountability. And the fact that they entirely skirted that, is just like, wow, how disappointing. I think there's really bad implications for that too. Something I need to talk about on my Patreon. We won't get there. All right, so moving into chapter 8, the quote we're looking at is on page 91. He wanted to use her to solidify his own power in the mall. His hated sister returned home and depended on him, enough like a sky maid to bestow the respect and authority of her former position upon her chosen allies, but mall-born enough to be accepted as one of them. How does the way Narampa navigates her privilege in the mall compared to the way she's navigated the classism and sexism she's faced in the celestial towers? And is one more difficult than the other? There's definitely a lot to discuss about Narampa, who I think a lot of us read in Black Sun and ended up just not liking her. Her naivete was definitely grating. And now that she's back in the mall with her brother, it's because I've read much further along in the book, I'm inclined to suggest that like this reading of Narampa's brother is slightly unfair. Is he fully exploiting her? But Narampa does come back, and it's kind of like, there's a constant reference to like the clothing she's wearing and sort of the brilliance of what she has on and how she's walking through these sort of spaces that are muddying her clothing. But I don't know, because she's still a very, very insecure character in Fevered Star. And I don't necessarily think that one arena, the mall, is any more difficult than the Celestial Towers. I might say because she was trying to procure power and she thought somehow that her as an individual attaining that power will be able to change the landscape and bring in sort of like this. I don't even know that Narampa was really searching for liberation, more so like fairness and reform. Okay, she was a reformist. That she definitely kind of put up with a lot more than I think she's inclined to put up with in the mall, but she's also not sort of facing, there's a certain reverence that she's being given this go around in the mall that she wasn't given in Black Sun. And she definitely is able to lean into the fact that like not only is she of these people who are basically explained in the book as like the land of like gangsters, it's kind of anarchy happening. Well, not really, because there's still like a council. It's like, the individual like lords that can come about that run their crew. And it's a lot of, backstabbing, quite literally. But that she shares an identity. It's not only that she shares an identity with them, it is that she has ascended to a height that they have been firmly kept out of, that there is some, what is this called? Exceptionalism. There is some exceptionalism that aids in the way people revere her and engage with her. And another quote on page 91: if you mean for me to merely assemble who would lead them all. Her voice was cool, the answer already obvious. Then Ochi leaned back, his grin bright, but his eyes cold as her own. Ah, Nara, don't be like that. If you survive your encounter with the Crow God Reborn, we will share leadership. And if I don't, she thought, then all that consolidated power will still be yours, and the Crow God Reborn even more feared. Because there won't be no power left. Revisit your opinions of Coyote's Mall, a disenfranchised clan within Tova in the outskirts that suffers from political exploitation, high crime rates, and extreme poverty from the Black Sun syllabus. Compare the ways the mall and Teak are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Zayala is from the Teak people, which are, this is, It's one of them books. Because I'm telling you, chapters 1 through 21 are just laying out the landscape. We hit 21, and the speed definitely picks up a lot in the book. Because we then get an explanation for the Teak people, a little bit more of their history outside of the history that we got through Zayala's character. And it's almost like the Teak people, I don't know, I don't think in Black Sun they were relegated as like, yeah, like socioeconomically they were on the bottom of the totem pole, but they weren't like discussed as like this like toothless people in the way that the Coyote Ma are discussed. Okay. This reader is saying, I don't like that she was able, Narampa, to have a redemption arc during the whole book, but was it really deserved? I don't know. You know, maybe I need to revisit Black Sun again because I don't remember ending Black Sun and thinking, dag, Narampa is a really evil person. I thought Narampa was incredibly naive. And that I mean, this is a spoiler here. Give you a minute if you want to tap out. But that she survives. I mean, obviously, it's obvious that she survives the convergence or the return of the Crow God. I think I haven't finished the book yet, so I'm still waiting to see like where it goes with Narampa. It does seem like she is there's no other way out. You know what I mean? She's the sun god. She's been imbued with whatever powers it is that she now has. Either she's turning her back on an entire people, or she got to pick up and fight something. The fight is kind of being pushed into her. I think it's interesting at chapter 8 to kind of ask what her brother Denaochi's primary motivations are. Because I think in where did I stop? I'm on the audiobook version. There's a real intense scene with her brother. And it kind of gives you, at that point, the idea that maybe her brother wasn't in this for self-preservation. I mean, he is trying to preserve himself, but he's not in this for like personal gain purely. That there is some sort of understanding that either we live under this crow god that none of us know what's going to happen, but we we just put up with the sun being blighted out, whatever that means for us, or we fight for something. And I think her brother does have some sort of belief in her, but as the syllabus asks, is war the only way? Because then when we go back to Carrion Crow, you still have what's that man's name? The brother who, after going to Hokkaido, that military school, is definitely kind of like upset that some sort of diplomacy hasn't been advocated for. Like he keeps mentally, there's this constant suggestion when we're reading through his thoughts in his head that he is remiss that there's been a lost opportunity for some sort of diplomacy to be used. Yeah, I definitely agree with this, that the Teak were treated as myths in Black Sun. While during Fevered Star, I felt like they became more humanized. They have a story very much so like the poor. I think we get a lot more context, and there's a particular scene, again, later in the boat. There's no Teak people involved in this conversation, but someone's desire to colonize or recolonize the Teak really kind of gives you a better understanding of how the people came to be, and sort of what context they're currently, or environment they're currently living under. And it's very, very interesting. In the syllabus, when we move into chapter 9, it suggested that Zyla embodies the generational. Ooh, that was a mean stutter. Zyla embodies the generational trauma of the Teak, and we're referencing quote on page 93. All you ever do is try, Zyla. Try and fail, and then run from the consequences. You leave others to clean up your messes. Well, this time there is no one else. This time you pay for what you've done. Wait, is that her talking, or is that the little lady she was fucking talking? Zyla be out here fighting. She does give generational trauma through and through. Like she been through it. Came from oppressed people, was the black sheep of said oppressed people. And oh, her memory. She shut it under the weight of the recollection and the truth of it. The deaths on the bridge. Oh, because Zayala is feeling like she has some sort of blame for what happened and the lives lost during the convergence. But I'm like, girl, you was in love with an unknown thing. And it just, your desire to protect that one individual definitely has some deep implications. But I don't know. I have to finish the book before I have a strong opinion on Zayala because of all the characters, she's one of my favorite. She's definitely still from Black Sun to Fevered Star. A little bit harder to love her this go around, but I still love her. She a little love lost, love lorn. Like, oh, poor girl. Consider some of the effects of generational trauma. And it is true, as the syllabus points out, Zayala is essentially an immigrant because the Teak people aren't part of, what is the actual land called, right? There is the connection. And if you go to the map, it is called the Meridian. Okay, I was using the right thing. But in the physical book, there's a map at the beginning. So you see all this is the connected land. Hokaiya, Barak, Toba, Shea, Toba. Let me not fuck up all these names. Koyakola, all connected, though they travel the seas to get from one side to the other. But the Teak territory, and as in the book, this is expressed as being very like you can see it, but people don't go by it. You don't go near there. You leave it to them. That is their land to have. And they're not considered as part of the Meridian itself. They are definitely othered as a people. And then the city of Tova is broken down in the back of the book, where they have all these bridges and stuff to connect the different lands to. Damn, don't tell me I'm going to be sad about Zayala. Wait until you finish the book. You're going to be even more sad for your girl. Some of the major twists at the end deal with her and the Teak's story and survival. Man, I stopped right where Balam was on the boat with that lady. And they was making compromises. And I'm like, damn. Don't take my people down. Give me free. It was giving me Serafina vibes. Don't be apartheid in my peoples now. Okay? Let's move on. So a quote on page 98 says, she had never gotten along, she is in Zayala, with religious types, at least until Serapio. And let him think she simply wanted to see a friend again, not that she wanted to rescue Serapio from the fanatics' den. Zayala takes an apolitical and an a-religious, agnostic, or potentially atheist stance. How might aligning herself with Serapio and Iktan, groups of people like the Water Strider, force her to align with the ideology and consequently become politicized? Oh, man. I think these are very good thoughts to think as you read the book about Zayala, because it is that maybe sort of my love for this character is one, I think Rihanna can play it, but two, also that she is sort of like this rebel without a cause. She is a free spirit. She doesn't align herself with any of the ethos of any of the groups that we're introduced to in the book. In that, Akoa comes with a very strong moral grounding as a member or high-ranking member of the Carrion Crow. Obviously, Serapio has been imbued with this religious mission. And then we get Zayala, who's truly just kind of trying to be free on the sea. She's trying to drink, fuck, and sail, But now that she has this attachment to Serapio and wanting to see his survival, she is going to be pushed into having some sort of ideology that she has thus far evaded. So I'm excited to see more. but it's definitely a good thing to think about earlier on the book. And it does definitely give you a much deeper reading of what is happening with these characters, because up until, as I keep saying, up until like 20 later in the book, it does feel like Xylas is kind of floating, and maybe we're not registering, if you're just doing a very loose reading of this book, all the different ways that you're seeing a member of a very oppressed community who was exiled from said oppressed community, put into the world of the colonizers, and has just kind of been subverting and flying under the radar, and then ends up as part of this very like life-changing, I don't even think cultural reset is a fair way to describe the convergence, and being culpable within the way the convergence went, and now having to grapple with what her political identity actually is, as somebody who's fully never had one and hasn't been able to evade it for so long. Yeah. Sayala does represent generational trauma or trying to get past it, but she can't help embody it because her trauma is also politicized and used as a political strategy. Very much so the current day indigenous and black folks. And it's like, yeah, out of her need for like safety and preservation, she's meeting characters with very strong political ideologies who are then engaging with her. We don't yet know why, what their end goal overall is, but they definitely have a political agenda with how they are going to utilize her for their own means. There's no way that Iktan is just being benevolent out of the graciousness of their hearts. Like, does Iktan have a heart is a question to be asked, definitely. Chapter 10. In chapter 6, Okoa has the following thought. And we're going back to page 62 to reference what's happening in chapter 10. And there was the reality Okoa feared most, that he dared not whisper even to the Odo Sado. Someone inside Carrion Crow had murdered his mother. And if this was true, then what? Accuse her outright with no evidence? Rip his family apart? Damn. Damn Carrion Crow to infighting over who would take the matron's throne if Essa was disposed? Identify the motivations of the Odahe and compare them with the political agenda of the Carrion Crow matriarchy. Note the similarities and differences. Well, I will let y'all do that on your own time. But that's definitely something that develops. Actually, the development that comes about what actually happened with Okoa's mother comes through characters that are fully outside the Carrion Crow. In a way that I was kind of like, oh, okay. Now, when is this little boy gonna find out? Because he is just run amok. He definitely has some emotional trauma and deep-rooted distrust of his family over suspicions of how his mother actually died. And I think it's because he doesn't have, the real answer or the real understanding, he definitely makes some misguided decisions around that. Yeah, and then in chapter 10, we also get Serapio has been thrown in jail by Essa, who is Okoa's sister and the matron of Carrion Crow. So the people that he is representing, that Serapio has lived this lifelong mission of liberating and placing in a position of power, his people are the same people that then jail him because he's seen as a radical. And they don't know how he is going to impact their personal power. So Essa, who wants to definitely play the fence, throws this poor boy in the jail. Is he a poor boy? I don't know. He done killed mad people. It's funny that I'm still reading Serapio as like a weakling when he definitely, had all this power in Black Sun that was unleashed, on the people of Tova. But it does definitely show that Essa has a disconnect from her people, because she's not attuned at all to what her people desire or what her people even possibly need. She is simply attuned to her own preservation of power and how she can, continue to control a community that she's been put at the head of. Mm, 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 mm. Not we just go pray for Akoa and get him in therapy. I definitely feel like, I think it was also you who commented about, oh, wait until you get later into the book because the story definitely picks up. Yeah, I need to go ahead and finish it. I'm probably going to finish it this week because once things pick up, I don't know. I had to take a break though. When we got to that scene with Dena Ochi and Narampa going to free her little brother, that was a lot. Okay. I was like, oh, y'all getting a little grotesque here. This is a lot to take in. I don't know. I'm getting old. I have an aversion to violence now. And so I'm like, oh my God, it's bloody. It's gory. I don't know. It's like me going to see the Woman King and like looking like this with all the scenes between the black people when they was fucking up the white people though. Oh, I was in it. I was ready for that fight. But other fights, I was like, oh no, not my people dying. All right. So in chapter 11, consider the two following themes. And if you're following in the syllabus, I'm on page 58 of the syllabus. While he succeeded in killing the Sun Priest, unbeknownst to myself, Golden Eagle had already staged a coup of the Watchers and installed their own Sun Priest. He glanced at his cousin, letting his contempt show, a priest who is not invested. As long as she lives, a part of the sun god lives in Tova. So from page 118 and 119. In your opinion, do oppressive rulers, beliefs, and traditions have to be completely eliminated in order to achieve liberation? What implication does the inextricable tie between the sun god and Narampa have on the religion, culture, and beliefs of Tova? No. What does liberation really look like? I don't know. Are you willing to say that all of them got to die? All of them have to be disposed of. All of them have to be eradicated, essentially. Like, other human beings have to get gone, in the physical sense, in order for the sort of actual liberation to be achieved. Because as we see happening in the background, even with what Essa is doing with the Carrion Crow and attempting to collaborate with other groups like the Water Strider or the Golden Eagle, the Golden Eagle, their people at the Celestial Tower were always imbued in some sort of, double-handed schemery, scammery in the dancery, okay? And they have not let that go. And there's always, it's also kind of like when you talk about eradicating the people, that doesn't feel liberatory, right? But when you think about moving towards liberation, there is, word to Pueblo Ferrero. Is that how you say that man's name? Damn, what's the name of that book? How I just forget like that. It was on the tip of my tongue. Pueblo Ferrero, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Okay. And talking about he talks about like a liberatory politic and like what it would take to reach liberation, and this idea that there like propaganda is always going to exist. There's always going to be a circuit of people. I don't think you can ever truly eradicate. That's why I don't necessarily believe that the attempts at eradication are salient, or this thought process that you should get rid of essentially unalive a bunch of people simply because they follow this other politic. There are always going to be people that desire the old way. I think even what got us to Carrion Crow, is rooted in, or the success of Carrion Crow is rooted in people believing this old way, right? The Odahe or the Adose-do, whomever, believing that they should return to the way prior to whatever actually helped to install the Celestial Tower and this new sort of constitution that they live under, because they felt that like their people were wrong. And there's always going to be like a group that feels somehow like they are wronged and would like to go back to the old. Now, how do you distill that, or how do you let that sort of murmuring continue? I don't know. I definitely think this book asks you to stretch the limits of your imagination. I don't know. Is there one true solution? I mean, this is a part of a trilogy. And I do feel like Black Sun is a better book than Fevered Star. But I think Fevered Star is still a very, very good book and a very necessary part because it's kind of like the, you know, when you have any book really or movie, you kind of have the beginning and then like the peak and then the ending. And I think somehow Fevered Star is kind of like, I don't know, we're still in the peak. I think like the peak is being translated over the ending of Black Sun, which ended with a really big cliff note. We're getting the filler of the peak. So like, you know, instead of like the peak being like a sharp point, it is kind of like this long rounded, and then it's going to come back down probably in the second half of the final book of the trilogy, which is slated for release next year, I believe. But this is kind of like a continuation of the peak, but also giving you a lot of the setting up the next book to really go out with a bang. I'm definitely excited to finish this trilogy because I definitely know I'm going to have a lot of questions. And I'm so excited to see this as a movie. I think this will be a great movie series if it can get into the right hands and Hollywood don't racialize it too much. You know what I mean? How are we going to see the European actors appear in this film? See, look, and then on page 39 of the syllabus, how does pedagogy change? Is it pedagogy? Look, change to justify oppression by dominant narratives in the world, right? This education of the people. How is suppression of history and cultural knowledge necessary in lieu of genocide to change a cultural landscape? The book definitely, I don't know if the book itself suggests, but I think it is kind of implied in some ways that there is either you eradicate these people that hold these old beliefs and knowledge, because there is a lot of discussion about the old knowledge that was banished but still existed somewhere. You know, Balaam gets his hands on it, Narampa gets her hands on it, and we haven't even really gotten into those scenes yet fully about like what that implication of Balaam having this access of Narampa coming to this new knowledge means. And it's definitely going to lead to some violence. It's absolutely, but like, I don't know that I would advocate for suppression of history. I don't know. Can we not all live within difference of opinions? I mean, it's 2022 in America. Look what the shit show is here. I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answer. This is a little rough for me too, but that is all we have. Oh wait, no. I was about to end early. Like, I got to chapter 11. Let me go. Sorry, y'all. I'm bugging. I don't know why I had chapter 11 is the end for me for this discussion here. All right, let's skip ahead to chapter 13. Macaw. Is it pronounced macaw? See, now this word, because I gotta read while I'm listening to the audiobook, because Ma'aka, I don't remember what this word is. Do you think Maka will go to the aunties? You saw how they reacted today. He could bend their ear, and if the word gets out to the common population and spreads to the district, it could be fatal to our cause. And what is our cause, sister? I thought it was saving Carrie and Crow, but I feel I've lost the thread of our purpose lost the thread of our purpose somewhere along the way. Perhaps when you threw the Oda Sado in jail. How is the relationship between Okoa and his sister Essa similar and different from the relationship between Narampa and her brother Denaochi? I feel like they don't be talking. There's a lot of things left unsaid between both groups. Definitely between Okoa and Essa. But part of that is Okoa has his deep distrust in his sister because he believes his sister killed their mother. Not going to spoil that part. But somebody need to free him from his thoughts. As it was stated, Okoa definitely needs some therapy. I think at chapter 12 of the book, 13 rather, we are definitely still coming to a better understanding of Dena, Ochi's, Denaochi's, motivations and what is truly happening there. And no, the syllabus is definitely throwing you a trick question about, do you think women are more willing to compromise on their morals, especially when gender expectations in relation to family bonds are involved? And I think this book makes a clear illustration that women can be just as unsavory as the men and just as self-invested as the men. There is no gender binary that makes them more sympathetic or understanding of the plight of the people, because what Essa, whether she did or didn't do the murder of her mother, is still very, very, very selfish person. Mm. Does anybody here agree with Essa? Do you feel like she is correct? Oh, this is a long quote from chapter 14, page 147. Narampa was starting to think that bringing her back from the brink of death had less to do with blood and god bones and more to do with whatever power resided inside her and revealed itself as a golden glowing heart. And that made her think it must have to do with the sun god herself, the firebird in her vision, the history of the sun priest. They all lived within her somehow. If she could discover how and what it meant, she was sure she would have the power she needed to convince the bosses and the clans to follow her and ultimately to confront the crow god reborn. Ooh, girl. I don't think Narampa really ready for war at all. Um, yeah. Yeah. How does the power that Narampa and Serapio have become exploited by those with economic and political power? I definitely think they are. Serapio, I don't know. I don't know. What we saying no to? What question did I ask? Um, yeah. I don't know. I still feel like I need to read more of the book before I can truly say, because I've gotten to the point where it's like I have some, grace to extend to Narampa, and Serapio is still trying to like kind of wrap his head around, where am I currently at? What context do I really exist in, and how do I want to pursue these things? Yeah, I agree that Narampa somehow wants peace. I don't know that, what she's kind of marching into, does she really understand the context of? Oh, refer to the map of Tova in the back of the book. How does the proximity of Golden Eagle to Sunrock benefited the imperialist ambitions of the clan? It might. How might the wealth, in combination with the acquisition of political influence and rulership following the destruction of the Watchers, change the social landscape of Tova? It is interesting though, because in the book, this is where the Celestial Tower is, and this is Toba, this is Carrion Crow, and this is Water Strider. I guess because it looks so small in the book, you think, oh, this is all really close, but technically, Golden Eagle does have the closest proximity to Sunrock, and they are the more dubious clan as we get more information in the book about what they've been up to. And I do think, word to Gloria Naylor and Linden Hills, space does metaphorically represent the socioeconomic disadvantage that you have to navigate society with. That, like, literal land proximity can ebb and flow and provide like socioeconomic advantages to folks. That even the distance of what is the other land, Coca-Cola has allowed certain people to like accumulate wealth outside of the standards that exist under the leadership of the Celestial Tower. You know. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead here to chapter 15, where Zayala and Serapio represent two extremes of the effects of trauma: heightened self-awareness and desensitization. Who has the heightened self-awareness and who's desensitized? How did others' treatment of Serapio shape him into a political tool? Think about the music industry, how rappers can produce violent tracks for monetary gain. How does desensitization result in the perpetuation of harm? How does the trauma that Zayala endures from the history of her people result in her self-afflicted harm? I guess Zayala is definitely going through a period of heightened self-awareness, but boy, is it embroiled in shame. She has a very defeated sense of self that I don't necessarily feel like she deserves to hold. Serapio literally like was blinded. He has been like physically desensitized in the harshest of ways. And at this point in the book, I still think we have to wait to see how he really fit to be used. Because later in the, like, not later, but even within this section, he's kind of, getting out of the prison that Essa had put him in and exploring the broader space and not realizing the way the people had gathered around him and perceive him. He doesn't envision himself as a leader. He had a single mission, and he was not supposed to survive that mission. And so when you are raised to be a sacrifice and then you become a living martyr is essentially a king because he didn't die. Is he ready for it? No. No. And it does seem like Zayala is definitely taking on some of this naivety as she's on the Carrion Crow camp outside of the main house. And when she runs into Iktan in her search for Serapio, just kind of like the trust and sort of connection she has to Iktan, I'm like, oh no, wrong person, girl. Danger, danger, danger. But she definitely goes through, as the syllabus points out, this period of trying to make herself ethnically ambiguous by hiding, the way Rebecca Roanhorse describes Violet, you definitely think of a very beautiful, unique looking woman. But also you have to, I think maybe it challenges you to think about, the how we've been viewed anti-Blackness, like big nose and wide lips are not seen as desirable. But Zayala lives in a land where purple hair and purple eyes is like, oh no, you a demon. You are the devil. How do we see ourselves? How do we view ourselves? A book can make us feel like, wow, somebody has to be beautiful. But do we understand the beauty in ourselves? Serapio is most deaf a pawn. He has so much power and is aware of it, but doesn't know how to escape it. He represents so much, but feels like nothing. Zayala is important to him because she sees him outside the power and symbol. I agree. I can't wait till they reunite and see what actually happens. They both finna come bust. He was never supposed to get no pussy. He wasn't built for that. Why is Iktan your fave, Wild Libra? Jai, Jer, and Iktan are your fave? I get so confused every time that character appears on the page. Like, it definitely is like a stretching of the imagination of the mind to kind of navigate the way Rebecca Roanhorse writes out that character and their sort of duplicity or triplicity, if that was such a word exists. Okay, here's a very long quote, and we're going to close out here. From page 181. The winter they were gone had been hard on Hokkaido, and the harvest the season before had been thin. They eyed their neighbor across the river, the city of Barak, and coveted. So they took what they wanted, and then they took the whole river valley. With the military might of the spirit maidens and the spirit magic of the dream walkers, they were unstoppable. Soon the river valley was not enough, so they looked to the south. It is said that back then the Teak did not travel on their floating islands, but lived in one place and traded freely with the world, until the spirit maidens and the dream walkers came and ravaged their home. Your people do not speak of it? Zayala shook her head, enthralled by the story. Once Teak were subdued and stripped of wealth, they ventured further south to Koyakola and the southern coastal cities. But the Koyakolans had sorcery of their own, shadow, stone, and blood magic, and were prepared. Were the Hokkaido spirit maidens successful in the imperialist treatment of Koyakola? Why or why not? Why do the Teak mistrust men when their oppressors were the spirit maidens of Hokkaido? I guess it is suggested the spirit maidens are women, but I also think we kind of have to think about outside of the gender binary in this book. He was not supposed to get no Teak cat. Oh, I'm saying, you know what I mean? Turn the little boy out. Fucked up the whole plan. I would love to hear more about why the Takes mistrust men. Because I actually think spirit maidens can, I don't know, was it explicitly stated that they were women? And I think it's interesting that Zayala is getting this history of her people from Icton. That she herself did not actually know the history of like why her people lived the way they lived or lived where they lived and had this matriarchal society. We have to think about how, I don't know, do you, the reader, can you surmise the answer to how can the divided Tova be united by the sun priest when the knowledge and history that resulted in the need to have a singular governing body is shrouded? Yeah, like that earlier question in the syllabus about a suppressed history. Does suppressing a history or culture of a people, does it really benefit? Can you sustain power that way? And even if, like, you know, thinking about, I want society to go to a certain way, I am going to eradicate these vestiges of a very negative society, but then I'm never going to discuss them. Is that sage? Is that wise? Is that smart? I don't believe so. All right. That is all for today, y'all. I will see everyone. Am I doing a reading next week? Let me look at my calendar. I think we are. On the 17th. Yeah. We're coming back a little bit earlier in the day to hit y'all with the third discussion for Fevered Star. So I will see y'all on Monday. Get y'all readings in. It's okay if you still reading Black Sun. It's okay if you just starting Fevered Star. It's a good book. I'm telling you, it's a good audio. They're both good audiobooks. Have a little listen. All right. I'll